This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. Politics is the business of meanness. It's mean in the sense that it's about fighting. It cares only about conflict and power in human relations. It's also mean in the sense that it reduces human experience to what is useful in those power conflicts. Because of this, politics tends not to care at all about aesthetics, about what we taste, about what we feel, and about what we smell. My guest this week has taught me that there are particular dominant ideologies in our society that are hostile. They might even be mortal enemies of things that I value, things that we would call sensual pleasure. What I taste, what I feel, and what I smell. This is my interview with Jack, the Perfume Nationalist. I am here with Jack of the Perfume Nationalist, who is in Austin, Texas, right?
Yes.
And Jack is the founder and co-host of the oddest, most brilliant, most interesting podcast I have listened to in quite a while, the Perfume Nationalist. I actually have a call into my mother. I'm hoping that she'll call during this so that we can check in on the perfume she wore, because
wonderful.
This is very important to me. And I was just upset that I didn't know the name of it because it's actually a very important part of my life. I did get the name of my girlfriend's perfume, which is also very important to me. But when you start your show in the weirdest way possible, because it's your show is, I guess, if it's going to be classified, it's going to be classified as a politics show, even though it's so not that at the same time. But political people have flocked to it, and you talk about politics. But the first 20 to 30 minutes of the show is often devoted simply to very rigorous analysis of perfumes. And you talk about the actual everything. You know the perfume industry inside out. You know how to smell perfume. You know what to look for. The way that you talk, I can't imagine being able to find all those notes in perfumes. But I haven't heard you, maybe you do in some of the podcasts, make explicit why you do that, but I have some guesses as to how it fits with your broader politics and worldview. Let me just tell you really quickly, like, my story with perfume. So when I was a kid, my mother was a shitty mother, really neglectful, was into politics, socialist politics, much more than being a mom, and was often away, and they would go out and leave us at home, and they go out. We were poor then, more or less, like working class, but they would save up all their money to go out on weekends in San Francisco. And my mother would wear a mink coat, and she would wear this perfume that she got in Paris. We were living in a bungalow on the Oakland border, not a good neighborhood. And she transformed this shitty little dirty bungalow into what I imagined to be Paris. I was engulfed by this smell, which to this day is still one of my favorite scents. And it transported me as a kid. And it was my first experience, I think, with a deep feeling of luxury. And I would have been 8 or 9, but it stuck with me. And so I've been with women since then, it's not like I can't be with a woman who doesn't wear perfume, but it's a major plus, and especially if I like it. So the yeah, my current girlfriend wears it. The perfume is Thé Noir. Um, the brand is Le Labo.
Oh yeah, that one's good. Yeah, I like that. I had the Lalabo Oud one, which is sort of similar to that spicy type stuff. But yeah, that one's nice.
Yeah.
Lalabo has the advantage of they're all really strong. So yeah,
Okay.
they
And you
last.
you wear a different perfume every day, is that right?
Yeah, I mean I own hundreds. I go through little phases with them. My main like kind of anchor ones are Clinique Aromatics Elixir, which is a 70s kind of rich hippie experiment in aromatherapy, which they still sell. Very weedy, uh, very acidic and bitter, unlike anything that people wear today. A whole lot of rose, a lot of patchouli. I love Terry Mugler Angel a
Mm-hmm.
lot.
Mm-hmm.
And Lancome Magie Noir. So I wear those probably more than anything else, and also just a lot of like different patchouli oils.
Yeah. All right. And then you got on your show, you have a heterosexual man as a co-host
Mm-hmm.
and a heterosexual woman.
Yeah.
Right. And now that's not so strange for her to be wearing perfume, but um, the heterosexual male co-host who sounds super heterosexual,
Mm-hmm.
he is right in there with you, right? As a perfume expert and aficionado, and he wears it too, doesn't he, on a regular basis?
Yeah, it's my brother. It's my older
Oh, that's your
brother.
brother. Okay.
Yeah.
I somehow
Uh-huh.
missed. You guys
It's a
don't.
family show.
You don't mention that much, or it doesn't come out.
We do, but I mean, you have to listen to all like 200 hours of content that we've recorded to know the
Maybe
whole
it's.
story.
Oh, maybe it's
We
that.
do mention it. I mean, you can kind of gather when I'm mentioning like the distant past or like familiarity with stories of like when I was a kid. I often like
Oh.
say he was there, but
Oh,
yeah,
I thought. Oh,
my
okay.
brother's the engineer of the show. He does all the technical stuff, all the music, all the
Okay.
editing. I don't even know how to put the show together
Okay.
at all. I don't know how to line up the audio tracks.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's because I've only listened to like the last 10 to 12 episodes
Oh,
where
good. Those are all really good.
yeah, I know. And the Blade Runner episode and
Hmm.
I can't remember you guys ever making that explicit. So I just assumed you were like high school buddies or something. Because you sound so different. You know, it's hard
No, I'm
to
the baby brother. He's 5 years older.
it's amazing.
Um, and no, he likes all the women's perfumes a lot more. I mean,
Huh.
if you listen to all of them, he dislikes the men's ones. It's like we very rarely do stuff that's technically for men. I don't even put them into the gendered categories, but he tends to like the over the top women's stuff like Poison a lot more. Yeah.
And so did that start when he was a kid? Oh,
Not at all. No, I
yeah.
got him into it. I red pilled
Right.
him on scent like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Because that's when I sort of started the hobby. I always liked scent. I started wearing patchouli when I was like 13 or 14.
Hmm.
And then my friend ordered a bunch of samples from Lucky Scent of weird niche stuff, and Luca Turin and Tanya Sanchez Perfumes The Guide, which is still the best perfume book ever and the best way to kind of learn the language of this stuff,
Okay.
came out in I think 2007 or 2008. And I just started buying old like 80s women's perfumes and instantly liked how they served as a time warp to another period. And scents don't have any gender, like this isn't any kind of like cringe 2010s like gender theory stuff like gender is a social construction. Like literally like men's and women's scents are just, it's just a marketing angle that emerged in like middle of the 20th century. Obviously some notes like tuberose and gardenia like smell like a woman, like you're just going to associate that with a woman, but other stuff like leather chypres, green stuff, um, people will look at you strange more because you're wearing scent at all or wearing something old in an older style,
Right.
than that you're wearing something that's technically for women.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, isn't it a good example of gender being a social construct, though? In that it's so fluid, the way that we think about which gender is attached to which scent.
I don't really think of it that way because nobody wears anything anymore. I mean, like
Oh, well, yeah.
Americans, like the barren landscape of the 2010s kind of erased
Oh, yeah.
all scent language in this way, and this sort of like leveling of everyone to the lowest common denominator of boring minimalism. And people by and large just don't wear scent. If they do, it's not really detectable. They certainly don't wear the type of stuff that I'm talking about on my show.
True.
So I think those old associations don't really apply anymore. I mean, I always say that the average like American's view on scent is basically like if you said American cheese was the only cheese that's good and everything else was smelly and disgusting. And so most people kind of have these mental references, like an aquatic from the 90s makes them think of middle school. Something like sweet candy gourmand makes them think of like perfume and like lower class or like uncool women.
Mm-hmm.
And anything other than that is old lady or old man. It's just these, or baby powder. It's just these catch-all descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like people just simply don't have the language for it, and they've usually never had any reason to think about it.
Are
So
you waging an aesthetic rebellion? Is that what this is?
yeah, it is a total aesthetic rebellion against every aspect of the 2010s, the worst decade in American history.
Yeah. Let's
In
talk about
term,
that.
which is still going on. I mean, the best example of what happened in the 2010s, I think, is that if you look at like McDonald's and like fast food restaurants, how they used to be like these warm tones, beautiful, cool ads with the Fry Kids and the Grimace and Ronald McDonald, and it was like a magical treat, and a dining room that was you wanted to go in, not those nice 70s looking dining rooms. And then, you know, in the last couple of years, they've leveled every single McDonald's to the ground and replaced it with what I call like neoliberal renovation.
Oh.
Like gray, often paired with a hideous like lime green or teal, just like that box, really cheap construction, intended not to remind anyone of like family or joy, uh,
Hmm.
anything from the past. You know, you can't remind like white people of family or anything. They have to be able to be eternal children. But this is all ugly. The specific aspect of scent, the performative hatred of scent and like identities primarily propagated by wealthy white women, based around voluntary elective allergies. This arose with smoking bans in the late 80s and early 90s. A process that you see depicted in very well in my favorite movie, Todd Haynes' Safe,
Oh,
with
yes.
Julianne Moore.
Yes, great movie. Yes.
Yeah, that's basically what happened to the entire culture.
Oh.
And now instead of,
Whoa.
you know, like in the 80s, people would define themselves with these strong, powerful scents. It was good to be seen as an aggressor, a stylistic aggressor in this way. And then with the 90s, that was all made very unfashionable. The perfumes all became like these minimalist, kind of office safe. At that point, they were still really strong, like Elizabeth Arden Sunflowers, CK1, all this kind of stuff. But people still wore scent. And then the 2000s came along. Basically, ever since the 80s, more people think scent is less cool. And people think that if they don't like a smell, then that means that it's killing them. I mean, barring minute exceptions, I think that everyone's scent allergies are performative, and
Really?
the proof of this is that everyone tolerated scent with no problem whatsoever in the 80s, before there was kind of like
That's right.
cultural gravitas attached to pretending to be allergic to things and exacting control over people through like, if you do that, then you'll kill me. You'll literally kill me.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. I have suffered from insomnia and what the shrinks call anxiety disorder virtually my entire life. And when I started using CBD 4 years ago, it helped. I was surprised. I was shocked, actually. I started taking capsules, gel caps. I started using tincture. I started eating gummies, and I felt my anxiety reduce. And it helped me with my sleep too. I caught the CBD wave like a lot of people, and so I'm sure I'm kind of speaking to the choir here. But if you've used CBD in the past, or you're going to buy it in the future, you better get a good deal on it, because there are a lot of CBD companies that are owned by mega corporations that charge a tremendous markup and will not give you the deal that our sponsor will. Paloma Verde CBD out of San Antonio, Texas, run by Carlos and Vanessa Abelar, who had a hard time getting started because banks would not give loans or even accounts to, quote, marijuana-related businesses. They persevered, though, and they established Paloma Verde as a CBD store to serve underserved communities in San Antonio. Now, that's all fine and well. I'm sure you appreciate the fact that they're entrepreneurs, independent and courageous, and have pushed through and created this business just through their own sweat, blood, and tears. But hey, they're giving you 25% off just for being an unregistered listener. If you also join their mailing list, you get 10% off on top of that. So that's 35% off your first order. And then they have what's called the Unregistered Combo Pack, which is my 3 favorite products from Paloma Verde. It's their tincture, it's their gummies, and it's their soft gels, all of which I use every day, and all of which have helped me with my insomnia and my so-called anxiety disorder. So go to palomaverdestore.com. That's palomaverdestore.com. Use the discount code RENEGADE. Get huge discounts. Oh, the Unregistered Combo Pack, I forgot to tell you. 33% off of all that. Go to palomaverdestore.com. Use the discount code RENEGADE. Save a ton of money. Get some products that will change your life. And I'll appreciate it. Thank you. So my mother loved scent, obviously wore a very nice Parisian perfume. My evil stepmother, on the other hand, claimed that what? She had an allergy to perfumes, and yelled at my girlfriend at the time many times for daring to wear a very light, some like teenager kind of perfume at the time. I thought it was ridiculous, but I have a theory as to, I'm sure you do too. I have a theory as to why scent has declined in American culture in the last 10 to 20 years. What's yours?
I think that the kind of dystopian kind of like that Ayn Rand depiction of liberals, like everything has to be out of consideration for others. This like noxious, like, but what if someone else doesn't like it? It's you can't. The whole issue with scent, like the white woman, the awful is not going to. I'm not going to call them a Karen. That term is fake. It's a psyop. That she will not react in the same way to ambient odors that are totally out of her control, like like the homeless man on the bus, like he gets some sympathy or whatever, but the act of putting on perfume is such a like deliberate thing, that somebody did that because they thought it was pretty, like this gets their gall. The fact that it was a choice, that you're not supposed to do that in polite circles. In affluent liberal cities, we simply don't do that.
Wearing perfume is also an act of self-aggrandizement, right? Which traditional American culture does not like. If you look at the Puritans and the Victorians, they did not like this at all, especially women being peacocking at all, right?
The 80s were really the only time that scents were, for Americans, were commonly like that strong, and socially accepted. Like, it was just the style at the time. Everything was bigger than life, and perfumes like Giorgio and Opium, I guess, if we're thinking about crazy styles, like the way that like 2010s like shit libs, like their personal style is such an eyesore, like the classic stereotype of like the blue-haired SJW and everything. Like, this is aesthetically ugly, but it's really intense to take in. But the perfumes of the 80s, I mean, yeah, that seemed like the brief shining moment where Americans could be in on the fun of just like coating yourself in Giorgio and like not caring what anyone thought.
Yeah. I also have to think it has something to do with the massive influx of women into the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, so they could no longer be powerfully feminine in the workplace. The workplace had been a masculine environment. I think it still is in terms of how it's fundamentally organized. I mean, it's organized along the lines of rationality and logos and discipline and all these things, and sacrifice and courage. All these things have been associated with men over the millennia. And women all of a sudden demanded and got access to that. And then we're in there and thought, oh, well, we can't really be women entirely anymore. I mean, there's a neutering going on. Isn't there a gender neutering for both genders? Isn't Paglia sort of saying this? I mean,
yeah, the icon of Palia's, what she calls Amazon feminism, is something that could only exist in that brief period where, I guess in the 70s and 80s, where like women in the workplace was fun. It was something fun and new, and people played around with it,
Right.
And this is why I pay such attention to that moment. I've done episodes on Kathy Guys White and Working Girl and Mary Tyler Moore. Basically, it seems like that was the only time that the genders were sort of coexisting in the workplace in a kind of fun way, where they hadn't yet figured out how to bureaucratize it and just bring everything down to the lowest, most boring level imaginable. But yeah, the icons of Palia's Amazon feminism and, how she sees women achieving the same things as men are Alexis Carrington, Joan Collins' character from Dynasty, and Donna Mills' Abby Cunningham from Knots Landing, who has always been my avatar on Twitter and everything. Is the Amazon feminist something that can really exist, or something that the average woman can achieve? Probably not, but it's great to have goals, and that's a lot more exciting than just going to fill out spreadsheets and your little like gray athleisure, like with your dirty hair. And I'd much rather everyone try to be Donna Mills.
I mean, the attack on all things feminine, ultra feminine, like Perfume, began, of course, in the 60s with second wave feminism. I mean, the great texts of second wave feminism, Betty Friedan, Robin Morgan, all those, I mean, they're clearly opposed to those things, the classic markers of femininity, right? Because for this very reason, because we have to become soldiers and CEOs now. We can't be wearing perfume.
Well, this also comes from a central misunderstanding of what perfume is, or what it could be in your life. And most people, having never thought about this stuff, kind of have this sort of received wisdom that it's about sex appeal, and that's it. And especially now, when you're more likely to be rejected by a date because you're wearing scent and it's weird to them. It's more about a personal aesthetic experience, a time portal. Like, you spray something on your wrist, you're watching a little movie, you're taking a trip, it's the Proust cliche. You're taking a trip to another time. Once you really get a handle on the language of this stuff and the different genres and styles of perfume, it becomes something that really makes your day worth living. It brightens up your day. Certainly does mine. I mean, but the old school feminists, you know, in the earlier generations of feminists, I actually like it's really the current 2010s low effort, low energy Jezebel cancel brigade that I don't support. I like Andrea Dworkin, and I
Really?
like when it meant something. I do. You know, she committed.
True.
you have to commit to something. These Jezebel ones don't commit to anything.
True.
But that kind of classic idea that all the accoutrements of glamour are just tools of the patriarchy. No, they're tools that women use. They're tools that women use to get stuff and to feel better about themselves and to have fun. Mm-hmm. This is just, of course it's an industry as well, but what isn't? You can't you can't completely remove yourself from the process of buying anything. You have to have fun. But I like seeing perfume more as an armor against the hideousness and drudgery of, you know, neoliberalism, the 2010s and after. Something to protect and isolate me from the rest of it. And also it's just a good I've really developed this multi-tiered approach the last 10 years in order to get away with wearing whatever I want wherever I go. And it involves, you know, kind of getting other people interested in the hobby. If you appear as this kook that likes perfume, this weird hobbyist, then they're less likely to report you to HR for your allergy violations, and think of you as an endearing eccentric instead. And also you can get them into it. You can give them some samples. The show is kind of the ultimate thing, because now I can literally just buy perfume and say it's my work. I'm always finding different excuses to just live exactly how I want to in the barren neoliberal landscape.
So this is the gay agenda. You're going to convert us through perfume?
Yeah.
And I mean that, actually.
No, and it's happening. It is happening.
And I mean it, and I want it. Yeah, because gay culture, gay male culture, for me, and I've written about it, is one of the 2 or 3 or 4 most liberating or liberatory forces in American popular culture for the last century or so or more. Heroes to me, the pre-marriage gays, you know. I mean, they brought how much of American fun and style and fashion and pleasure? I mean, you know, you got African Americans and Jews, and then there's gays. I mean, I don't think if you take those groups out, this is definitely the neoliberal hellscape you're talking about without those groups, right? And now those groups are becoming assimilated.
Sure.
And
and people fundamentally misunderstand that too. I mean, no one, since history itself and having an interest in history is stigmatized now by the libs, because, you know, that's just, history is just a tool of white supremacy and patriarchy.
Well, the wrong
reading is a tool of white supremacy and patriarchy. But people misunderstand. I'm always saying this on my show, but regular gay men are not contained in the current LGBTQ plus acronym. It's not just a mild hostility towards them. It's literally 2 separate things. They're quite open about what they think of regular gay men. We're about, I mean, we don't have barely any kind of privileged victim status anymore. Unless you totally make yourself spiritually female or physically female, you know, you have to kind of bow to the altar of femaleness in order to be this little court jester for the LBQT, all the other ones, which is mainly just kind of this voting block of the and propaganda wing of the Democrat Party. But regular gay men, I mean, I think regular gay men and straight men are really getting together and preserving the West, or preserving you know, everything interesting about culture right now, because we're both so alienated. And as Paglia said, gay men used to be the ones who would say things that absolutely no one else would say. And I'm using what little bit of gay victim privilege or whatever that gets me to say things that no one else will say.
You're the last one. You're the last dangerous fag, right?
Yes, hopefully.
Well, I mean, we'd like for there to be more. I mean, but
No,
yeah,
I would like for there to be more, but I mean, all people do, like the kind of go-to, uh, I don't want to say the word cancel, but like if you're gay that like doesn't do what you're supposed to, they just like accuse you of being another Milo.
right.
So that like Milo
Right.
provided the template
Oh, right.
for the libs to just be like, oh, it's another Milo. Like he's the example that was like,
Right.
putting the stocks
Right.
on the square.
Right. Well,
You don't want to be another Milo, do you?
The
Yeah.
Nazis were gay too, you know.
Yeah.
So have you seen their posters? It's true.
Mm.
There was homoerotica running all through the Nazi propaganda.
Well, look, this book right here, Male Fantasies.
Is that
That's all
about?
about that.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah.
Mm.
By the way, there's quite a bit of very similar homoerotica in the New Deal propaganda too in the 1930s here. So if you look at
Mhm.
like road building projects, pick posters for them in Germany, and road building projects posters for them in America, they're the same thing. They're two young slender men, shirtless, hugging each other, or like having an arm over each other's shoulders, smiling out in nature, you know. So
Well, unfortunately, gay rights destroyed homoeroticism forever. I mean, I think gay
yeah,
marriage kind of destroyed homoeroticism because really,
yeah,
like men were just much closer with each other and much more open at every other. And I'm not talking just sexually, like emotionally,
mm-hmm.
everything. Less closed off with each other at every point in history before the 2010s. Like,
Now,
and you could still get a touch of this, a little sense of this with those like good old boys that'll like play grab ass with you, and like they're very flirty, like old like Southern men
yeah,
that, and not in a like, I'm not saying they're homosexual, but it's a kind of flirtation,
yes,
just the kind of like courtship that used to be there in like regular male friendships, that now
yeah.
everybody's just so like just totally asexual and like, well, I'm not gay, so why would I be flirty with any, nobody's any fun anymore.
I agree. So that was all, that was all explicit and planned. That was the
Yeah.
purpose. That was the purpose of gay marriage. It was stated at the beginning explicitly
Hmm.
by the leaders of the movement. Andrew Sullivan and Larry Kramer gave speeches and wrote articles at the beginning of the gay marriage movement saying just that. We need to close the bathhouses and stop fucking in the bushes. Those are quotes from
Hmm.
those guys. And they were like and that's exactly what it became. So it went from like naked people and drag queens at Pride to Wells Fargo and Bank of America at Pride. And in fact, they've now barred drag queens from most, I think, or many Pride parades, something like that. At least there's been a lot of talk about
Yeah,
that.
drag queens are barely allowed to exist anymore. I mean,
Right.
it has to be like repurposed and done in the language of the trans stuff.
Right.
But so, like RuPaul's Drag Race is a great show. It's one of the most influential shows of the 2010s, but there's a point in the middle of it where it turns into something else entirely.
Hmm.
Basically, kind of before Trump, there were a lot of people in the culture that were sort of like anti-PC,
Mm-hmm.
like RuPaul, like Joyce Carol Oates. It used to be like a troll
Yep.
online.
I know.
Like libs hated her.
Yeah.
All of these people ran right back into the closet as soon as Trump came out, and suddenly they would not say anything. But like the first several seasons of Drag Race are amazing. Like
Yeah.
RuPaul had them doing like Gone with the Wind challenges. They awarded Sharon Needles the win in the best season, and Sharon like wore like Confederate flag bathing suits on the show. Had a history of signing like headshots with the N-word, hard R. Wore swastikas with his boyfriend Alaska, who's also one of the great ones.
Oh, wow.
Like drew swastikas on their faces. This was back when like hipsters were fun and everything. But just as an example of,
Wow.
I'm surprised that season hasn't been totally memory hold.
Yeah. So, wow, I didn't know it was that radical. I watched those
Mm-hmm.
seasons and I remember just thinking, and I know the guys who made that show, World of Wonder, Fenton Bailey, Randy Barbato,
Mm-hmm.
and went to their parties and stuff. But I thought the first 3 seasons were just staggeringly brilliant. Like I thought it was the smartest show ever on TV. And then, yes, It also devolved, I think, into, I went to a live drag race show a couple of years ago in Portland, and it was mostly just talking shit. It was just so much of that, like
Yeah.
really nasty put down humor, which they're really good at, but it's that old school Don Rickles channeled through like a black drag queen's voice. They would talk, they would make fun of the audience, they'd make fun of, not make fun of, they just eviscerate each other on stage. And I that's like the one part of drag that I don't like, that culture of put down.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Another aspect of Drag Race was that it was, in the early seasons, it was explicitly a parody of America's Next Top Model and Project Runway.
That's
and
right.
This is forgotten because it's now its own phenomenon, but like
That's right.
the whole Vaseline lens of the first season and the way that RuPaul is just depicted as this all-knowing God, you know, all-knowing, what's the word? All-seeing kind of entity, like Tyra is exactly like that on America's Next Top Model.
Right.
And so like the current Drag Race people and the current like drag queens, which are basically just kind of people who put on makeup and take pictures of themselves for Instagram, there's not really, like they do these appearances where they kind of bop around to a lip sync, but it's really all just Instagram. And there's very little more to it anymore, but there's no like cultural backlog in any of these people's minds. They don't even seem aware of the early seasons of the show. They think it's funnier to like just be aggressively like stupid and ageist about it and act like it's bad to, you know, this is something common to liberals where they act like it's actively undignified to like know about stuff before the last 2 years.
Right.
But the meanness, no, I'm not mean. I'm a big softie, but I'm a Cancer. I cry at everything. But yeah, that kind of put down stuff, it worked, you know, back in the day, like Paris is Burning era, when there was actually, you know, a kind of mainstream culture, you know, that was a counterweight to that. But now, just like mean, stupid drag queens are the mainstream culture. So it doesn't really say anything. Yeah.
3 months ago, the Unregistered podcast became a video podcast as well as an audio podcast. Every episode is videotaped and available on YouTube on the Unregistered channel. This has been incredible for the podcast. It's expanded our audience and made it very exciting for me every single week to produce something on a new medium. However, it's also cost us quite a bit. We've had to pay for video equipment, and so far, it's relied entirely on the volunteer efforts of our incredible staff of audio engineers and YouTube producers. I would like to support those people in making all of this possible, but I need your help in doing that. Go to unregisteredunderground.com and join the group if you just want to help the show. But you get a lot more than that. We're not just asking for donations. Every Thursday night, I host Unregistered Live, which is a live Zoom meeting with members of the Underground. We talk about everything. They ask me about my personal life, behind the scenes stories of the podcast. We talk about politics, culture, you name it. It is the highlight of my week. I cannot wait for it. It is incredibly fun, and we've been doing it for several months now. So you get that if you become a member of the Underground. You also get a free tour of Renegade University, which includes one lesson from every one of our courses and access to the Quad, which is our own proprietary social media platform. On top of that, and this is for many people the most popular part of the Underground, you get access to our private Facebook discussion group, which has been jumping off for 3 years now, actually. We have many members. They are right now probably debating about something as we speak on there. It's a ton of fun. I jump in. Guests of the show also participate. That is also part of your Underground membership. Go check it out, unregisteredunderground.com, and you'll see, I think it's a pretty good deal for all you're getting. But please also consider helping the show if you watch or listen. Thank you so much. So let me get back to your worldview, your ideology, perfume nationalism, right? You've coined this, and you do believe it's a coherent ideology, right?
I do. Live, laugh, love is a big part of it.
Okay.
I mean, there's a sense of humor in all of this.
Sure.
It continuously blows my mind when like people will see something called the Perfume Nationalist and they're so literal minded that they think that I like named the show that and did what I did like in an accidental attempt for like mainstream approval and just failed horribly. Like, you know, when Bjork wore the swan dress and like everybody was like, why did she come out of the house wearing that swan dress? She thought that, like she was trying to like look hot in the swan dress. This fundamental misunderstanding, like okay, Perfume Nationalist, like this is self-evidently ridiculous to anyone with two eyes and two brain cells, but they're all like, what did this loser think he was doing? Does he think he's gonna have a media career calling something a Perfume Nationalist? Like, I cannot tell you how dumb the haters are. Okay. But yeah, it's basically, I would say it's a coherent ideology, because I mean, I just encourage people to turn away from like flash in the pan meaningless like news and politics. Like, it's funny you said it's a political podcast. Like, it is, but it's primarily a cultural commentary podcast, and I'm not that political. I mean, I'll vote against Democrats for the rest of my life. That's the extent of my politics. I don't care. I just want to vote against Democrats for the rest of my life as revenge for the 2010s. I just hate Democrats.
Yeah.
But
healthy.
Yeah. The ideology part is mainly like, you should focus your efforts on appreciating art and kind of retreating into this like against nature Huysman world of history and aesthetics and literature. And you should actually try, you should actually put effort. Like, the 2010s stigmatize like art that requires effort, like reading anything that's difficult or long. Like, there's this sort of social media mindset where people say, I had to stop watching after the first 15 minutes, or I had to stop listening after the first 15 minutes. They say that about literally everything. Like, that's literally like the normies take on every single movie ever made, every single podcast. They say, I had to stop listening after 15 minutes. And that's not relevant. No, you need to shut yourself in a room, read the entire 1,500 pages of Samuel Richardson's Clarissa, just for the fun of it, just to have a window into another time and early literature. And that's the kind of thing you need to learn how to do, to get away from this. I had to stop reading after the first 15 pages, the first 15 minutes, like just that mindset. And this is why I'm always encouraging people to partake in huge maximalist works of art, like soap operas, with plot lines that last decades, hundreds of episodes, thousands of episodes are an example of this. I just think people need to think more broadly. And if people think more broadly, the culture will be less stupid overall. Because so much of this current mindset is just about everyone having the cultural memory of a goldfish and pretending that it's always been like this.
So you call this neoliberalism, right? What you're critiquing.
Yeah, and I don't know what neoliberalism actually means. I just my definition of it is those like gray clapboard McDonald's renovations.
Okay.
And basically any kind of like leveling, minimalist, genderless, sexless ugliness that came about with the 2010s.
Yeah.
Like, it's like pornography. Like, you'll know it when you see it. But
yeah.
I don't know what the term originally meant. I didn't understand. But I formed my own definition.
Yeah, there's a long history of left-wing asceticism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And feminism has certainly been a big part of that, right? Just an attack on the body and pleasure by the left, and especially by feminism and by liberals. And so I could see, I don't know what neoliberalism means anymore either, because it's used to describe all kinds of stuff. But your definition makes some sense to me, because I do see, again, I'm going to use this word, I guess, a neutering or a desexing of the culture and making it totally utilitarian. So what is of utility is what is valued now. And I think that, again, this has to be about feminism,
Mm-hmm.
because feminism had to do that. It had to take the culture out of the workplace that women had put into it by whatever means, by the secretaries who are working there or just the culture around them. But once women are in there, it's, you know, they get in trouble if they have any semblance of femininity on them, right? So if they wear lipstick or long nails or high
and
heels.
it's other women policing it, by the way. That's a big thing.
Oh yeah.
That I get into trouble for is that I will fearlessly name the woman because I have to, because you can't talk about 2010s neoliberalism without being honest about the fact of who was enforcing all of this stuff and who is seemingly so willing to jump on the boat of every single passing little social justice cultural fad over and over and over again and immediately become the enforcers of it. Right. You know, I'm sorry, like women, I love women. I love women. I love women. I love women genuinely, and a lot more than most of the women that I know. And it's funny that I get called a misogynist because I spend so much of my show defending the works of widely hated women and asking people like Lena Dunham and stuff, and asking people to view their art separately from the cultural phenomenon surrounding them and the sort of negative reception of them. Like Yoko Ono is another one, Ayn Rand, Courtney Love, Camille Paglia, Red Scare, all of these. But I just think that somewhere along the line in the 2010s, the maternal instinct was distorted in such a way, or, you know, this is after like 50 years of this hypnotism, but the maternal instinct is distorted in such a way that it's like basically nihilism now, this sort of like concept of empathy that they bring out, since the libs can't have religion. They just have this kind of this word called empathy, which just basically means like Nazism. You know, like it just means being a Nazi and being evil. But they, you know, they're all doing this in the service of something called empathy, not, you know, for God or out of the goodness of their own heart. It's just, but it's like black-hearted nihilism, and I think there's a real like thirst for self-destruction there. I think they literally just like want to be like thrown into the black hole, but they don't know it. They're not aware of what their motives, because like I think overall women have a strong desire for social conformity, and that's the source of all of this.
Okay,
there are a lot of like bold renegade women thinkers who like shocking people, but the vast majority really like total social conformity and playing, but they love rules. They like viewing everything as a kindergarten class.
Yep.
They're herding the men around, and you know, we've seen what's happened with the masks and everything, how quickly everyone just adopts new sets of rules and loves enforcing them.
Yeah, well, look at the family, right? And who enforces the rules inside the family? You know, it's the mom. You know, in your typical middle class family, that's who does it, right? And even in the working class family and the poor family, it's the mom's enforces the rules. She's the cop. So it makes sense, right, that they would take on that. In fact, that was the argument made by the original suffragists in the 19th century was, hey, look how well we do with the family, with the home. We keep it clean and pure, and there's no alcohol in here, and the men are under our control. So that's why.
And now there's no family. So,
but then the argument, but then they would be like, and look in the streets where the men are. They're drunks lying in the gutter. So what you need to do is give us. This was the argument for the vote. Give us power so that we can purify, and that was actually the word they used. Purify the public sphere where the men are. That was their actual argument, and then we got prohibition right after that. That was the first thing they voted for.
This is all depicted very well in D.W. Griffith's Intolerance, which has like 5 different storylines, but my favorite of them is about meddling women reformers.
Oh, really?
This is from 1918. Oh, yeah, it's all there. Oh. Everything you could possibly want to know about, you know, giving women the vote and everything is there in Intolerance.
And it's great that it's D.W. Griffiths who holds no historical baggage whatsoever, so I can just
it's a totally safe You know, just buy your DVD D.W. Griffith box set. It's a totally safe thing, you know.
Well, no, but I can't go around citing it because he's one of the most famous racists in American history. You know what I mean?
You can't just put D.W. Griffith and your like cited sources and just expect everyone to be okay with it.
No. No, it'll carry much on. I mean, come on. And social media, can you imagine? D.W. Griffith said this about women. It must be right. I mean,
yeah. I mean, look, Griffith knew long ago. Why are people missing this source? This great source.
I'm sure he's right. So, so you were born and raised in Central Texas near Austin, right? And
I was born in Austin.
Yeah. And I have heard you say that you were surrounded by what you call libtards as a young person, and could have easily. I really
wasn't, though. That wasn't until the 2010s.
Oh, okay. I guess they became your friends, but you said at some point that because you were gay, they sort of assumed you would be one of theirs, right?
Oh yeah, there was that. I mean, I've been openly gay since I was 13 or 14.
Uh-huh.
In the early 2000s, in like a suburb of Austin, where, you know, at that time it was totally socially acceptable to be homophobic and stuff, but like, as I always say, like I didn't get any crap from conservatives, or, you know, there was a little like gossip behind my back, but nothing compared to what I've gotten from liberals continuously my entire adult life, which is like total like social rejection and cruelty, just everything, like name it. Liberals have done it to me. But yeah, since I was like the most like visible and, let's be honest, cool gay person in high school, like that generation of like kind of anti-Bush, like the kids that were like precocious, like in AP history, and like got their parents to buy them a subscription to the New York Times for Christmas, and loved like Jon Stewart, like that was like peak like Daily Show liberalism,
right?
Which seems almost innocent in hindsight, but yeah, like all those teachers and stuff that were like, you know, libs kind of like tried to co-opt me and tell me, oh no, regardless of what you think about yourself, you're always going to belong to the Democrat Party. You know, that was always the message. And I knew that there was something wrong there, but I didn't know. I hadn't found anyone else that could kind of explicate my experience. And then when I was 18 or 19, I discovered Camille Paglia through the commentary track she did on Basic Instinct. And I read her books of essays and Sexual Personae, and I was like, oh, it's all here. Finally, someone says everything that I've been thinking, and I have a place in the world. And it was like a mainstream media phenomenon, like all through the 90s. It's not even some obscure thing. Like everybody bought these books, and she was all over TV.
Right. So what were you thinking? What were you thinking before, right up until you encountered Paglia, that you found in Paglia?
Well, my best and most influential gay friend, who informed my taste to such a huge degree, he was pretty conservative. Like there was just no concept. Like it's not like Bush was appealing. Like both sides then of the spectrum. Like Trump is the first like politician that I ever felt anything positive or derived any kind of inspiration from. So it wasn't like I was like, I'm a Bush Republican secretly at that time. I was just like, there's something off and like kind of queasy about the way libs depict the world, and like just like I liked it. Like a lot of my friends were libs, but like I was kind of repulsed by their like goody. There was just that kind of icky goody underlying like prissy thing. And then they went to college, and that's when like the real transformation happens, because like all the girls that I was friends with and everything were like very open. They found me delightful. I would like make them watch Pink Flamingos and Last House on the Left and all these movies filled with rape every day after, you know, and they loved them. And then they go to college and they developed this like performative, magical feeling about like depictions of rape in movies. And I was like, what's going on here? Because one time I just went over and was hanging out with like a female friend, and suddenly she just like snapped at me for mentioning James Bond movies. I was like, there's really something going on at college in that that African American studies class or whatever she's taking. They all just became like unbearable. I remember like them like yelling at me and like a male friend for laughing at like a South Park joke about like, George Lucas like raping Indiana Jones on the pinball machine, and like it was just always about just this cloistered atmosphere of just like rage about like having to scold men for what they were laughing at. And this was before the larger culture even developed the sort of woke liberalism that we're now living under. This was the late 2000s and early 2010s. So I was like, there's something going on with the girls. It's not good. And then in 2013 or 2014, it broke big, and that was the end of everything. And soon enough, every single person that I would see in the physical realm in real life would be an operative of this kind of stupid, censorious liberalism that hates humor and history. I also remember another friend, like on one of these like early like 2010s like feminist websites, they said that all old movies should come with like trigger warnings about the depiction of women. And I posted on Facebook, and everybody was on Facebook then, was like, this is retarded. And she like messaged me like trying to keep me in line, like, I can't believe you're making fun of this, like this is what should happen. And now I've just been, and then I've basically always been the same on social media and everything. There's been no divide between my personal life and the image that I project. I was posting stuff like what I post now on Facebook to an audience of 150 people I knew in real life that hated me, but except everyone likes me. But like I was doing that, and then when Trump happened, and they were like, this is literally going to end the world. I supported Trump from like May 2015 because I was so sick of liberals. I was like, I love this. Whatever's happening here, he just swept in like the Guardian Force animations and Final Fantasy games, and made every single person who I didn't like mad, and I loved it, and I was on board from day one. And that was too much, and I was made a pariah after that, and all of these people who used to like my carefree spirit and love of art and everything distanced themselves from me then. And 5 years later, I guess that's when the podcast started. Wow.
Okay. So wouldn't you say that Donald Trump has a gay camp aesthetic?
Yeah. He's a soap opera villain. I mean, he's a soap opera hero. But,
yeah.
He's both. He's JR and he's Bobby. But yeah, his whole aesthetics, the Trump Tower, the 80s excess. I mean, it's everything that I like. The fact that he had celebrity perfumes and all of that. And, everyone hates Trump, like on the right, everybody has to be too cool for Trump now. But, I'm right there. I'm just this red line going straight through everyone's little stupid meme candidates of like Yang and like, I'm not voting, and like all, everybody's dumb little phases. It's like, no, just Trump's the only thing you should care about.
Culturally, there's no question to me that he's queer and always has been, right?
Yeah, he's the first like drag president. He's the first woman president. He's the first Jewish president.
First black
drag president. He's the first gay president. He's all of that.
I think he's the first black president too.
Yeah, he's black too.
The self-aggrandizement, the gold-plated everything.
Which is a big thing that the libs don't like about me. Okay.
Yeah.
The libs, upper class white people really don't like kind of like announcing yourself. Like I draw a lot of inspiration from rappers in terms of how I announce myself and how I, talk about the podcast. I'm a carnival barker. Because my product is good, and I have to make people understand what's going on because they're not going to understand it. And every other podcast in this kind of realm has this kind of like who, me, like dippy, like New York, like fake self-effacement, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is my shitty podcast. And like, this is just my shitty podcast. It's so shitty. And like, like that's the only kind of like established thing. But our podcast is here, and it's like, we're the greatest podcast ever made. This is the first art podcast. And people just cannot stand this. It's what they hate about Camille Paglia too, is that she just explains everything very clearly to a broad audience every time. Okay. She just announces herself in this confident way and doesn't like preface anything with mealy mouth little qualifications that, you know, you have to speak in generalizations in order to be a good orator. And like libs hate speaking in generalizations. They're like, I gotcha, because there's an exception to what you're saying. It's like, no, the exception is self-evident.
Okay, so I might be identifying a paradox, perhaps a contradiction. I don't know, or just a nuance in your thinking. So I've heard you valorize what you call the trad wife to some extent, or you have some sympathy for the trad wife, no?
I mean, yeah, like the older generations, I don't know that the trad wife is something that exactly can exist anymore, but the whole,
the idea,
like online right-wing phenomenon of the trad wife, no, they all hate me because I'm like the degenerate homosexual coming in and like stealing their men and making them buy perfume.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Those people all hate me.
But so maybe let me try another tack. So why do you call it nationalist? Why do you call the podcast nationalist?
First of all, it's a band name, you know. People think of things in very literal terms, and there's this this disconnect. Like people will hate me for calling it that, but they're wearing a Joy Division shirt that they got at Target, and like Joy Division is named after like Nazi sex camps. For some reason, people cannot understand like anything happened like currently around them that could be doing a similar thing. But I mean, with that name, I don't remember if I thought of it or if one of my friends, the Eternal Dillards on Twitter, thought of it first, but it just stuck as a kind of self-evidently ridiculous and contradictory thing. And I was deliberately playing on the way that everyone is called a Nazi in current culture. And it was designed to inflame, like all the way people get mad about it at first before they realize what's actually going on with the show. That was all by design, because most people tend to hide like objectionable content in their stuff and like, you know, like put it on the back burner or whatever. And what I did was front load my show name and everything else with all the objectionable, cancelable content as a statement. And you'll see that like the early episodes are much more extreme because I wanted to get an audience. That was the only way to get like straight men online buying perfume, and it worked. Look, everything I did worked. But it was always intended as a humorous take on the way that the whole witch hunt of the 2010s and how everyone was called Nazi. And I didn't want to call it the Perfume Nazi because I'm not a Nazi, and I don't think that's as funny. I think Perfume Nationalist is a lot funnier because it sounds. I just imagined some kind of like, you know, like weirdo, like bizarro universe, like Rush Limbaugh thing going on. But yeah, I mean, it was always intended as a statement about cancel culture.
Maybe I was reading too much into it, but I do think there's maybe an interesting dialectic, I suppose, inside there that does really reveal a lot of your thinking. So, or
I don't know what a dialectic is. That's one of those words.
It's a creative conflict, basically. It's a creative like thesis meets antithesis, which creates a synthesis and a new thing. So I think that's what it is. So perfume represents, as I said, self-aggrandizement, the celebration of the self and the body. It's also highly individualistic, right? Each person chooses their own scent, and we talk about different scents all the time. Now runs completely contrary to nationalism, which is of course collectivist, right? And so there's no nationalism that's going to like perfume, at least the way that gay men and you know, deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. So there's that now. So one might say, well, that's just a contradiction. Therefore, it's just an ironic joke he's making, right? Because perfume and nationalism don't go together. But actually, I think what you're trying to do is trying to work out some reconciliation between the two. Sounds to me like, right. So because there is a conservative streak in you that wants to, that sees value in traditional, not conservative, but traditional gender roles and gender performances. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, and maybe what you're doing in a Paglia-esque fashion is like looking to the past to find aesthetic richness where it does not exist now. So maybe in the nation's past or in the mythical past, there's aesthetic fullness and richness that we don't have now under the neoliberal regime. So let me pause because I have a call from my mother.
Okay.
Hi, Mom. Yeah, I have a random question for you. I'm recording the podcast right now, and I'm interviewing a guy who has a podcast that's devoted to perfume. He's a world expert on perfume. And I wanted to know the name of the perfume that you wore when I was a kid. Shamad, she thinks.
Shamad, yeah,
Shamad.
wow, that's a pretty obscure one. That's magical. Yeah, it's a green chypre. It always makes me think of Rosemary's Baby in that time period. It's like from the late 60s, Guerlain. I eventually want to do an episode pairing it with Rosemary's Baby, actually. But Shamad, yeah, that's some cool obscure taste there.
There you go.
I was thinking it was going to be like number 5 or something.
At the time, it was kind of popular. This was like in the early 70s, right?
Yeah.
When I was born, 60s, mid 60s. Yeah, right. Well, you got a high score on that.
Yeah, I have Shamad, right?
Yeah. And he has it right now. He's got it on the shelf. He's showing it on the screen. I'll show it to you later.
Spray some on.
He's spraying it on him now. Well, you smell like my mother. I would need to rest my head on your.
This
on
is
your
how I get
if I saw
him.
you right now, and on your lap. I'd have to be on your lap right now, Jack, if I saw you. Thanks, Mom. I'll call you later about the other stuff. Okay. Bye-bye. Well, there you go. You're
That's awesome.
You're spreading the word far and wide.
I was not expecting Shamad.
Oh yeah? Why? Because she's an old lady?
No, because I've never heard of any. I've never like met anyone or talked to anyone that wore Shamad. It's just I think it was a big hit in the late 60s, early 70s, but
yeah.
It's not like usually if people have a history with a Guerlain fragrance, it's like Shalimar,
yeah,
kind of one of the more well-known ones. That's cool.
It's so imprinted on me, right? Because I was a kid when she wore it. So to me, it's just the most beautiful perfume. Like when I smell that, it's totally transporting. And yeah, I love that scent. I love Thé Noir too. My girlfriend's scent too. It's very different, but as soon as I met her, I thought, oh wow, it's one of the first things I noticed about her, and I mentioned it. She's one of the few women who wears scent on a regular basis, in neutered neoliberal Northern California, where all the women are too busy swimming in the ocean to wear perfume and running. So yeah, I see like perfume is so individualistic. It's hedonistic. It is self-aggrandizing in ways that the founders of this country, the Puritans and their forebears, the Victorians, really did not want at all. And it works against the collectivism of nationalism, right? But at the same time, in nationalism, right, there's always these appeals to the past, right? It conjures this past that we love, this mythology. And maybe what you're saying, and I think Paglia does say this, is that in the past, there is an aesthetic fullness and a richness that we are now lacking in our neoliberal bunkers and cubicles and colorless and odorless world. Is that right?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, even if you look at how chain stores and fast food restaurants looked in like the early 2000s, when like Gen Xers were like, in like Ghost World, like calling this about as hideous as it could get, people could not foresee that every public space would be turned into what looks like a hospital, and not even a cheap hospital.
Right.
Every restaurant, and there's this performative hatred of carpet now. For the last like 15 years, there's been a kind of received sort of like revulsion at carpet. And I've been into the carpet question a lot recently, and think, because like the sort of like laminate floors that look like wood that everyone has now are so like cold and unfriendly. And I miss the 80s era of like carpeted bathrooms and all of this. There's just a warmth to it. But I'm definitely extremely nostalgic and looking to the past because I don't know where else to look, and I don't know what the future will hold. And the only way that I can create art is through curation, like trying to create something new through curation and through new formats, like the podcasting format, which is kind of the last sort of Wild West where people at this point can sort of say what they want to say, and have some control over it and do weird stuff. And most people don't really recognize the potential there. But yeah, that fundamental contradiction there also comes from just not knowing where I stand, because nothing makes any sense. Looking to the past for some kind of way forward, and the way that having an interest in history and art and anything before the last 5 minutes is now stigmatized as actively harming another person, of like doing violence to people, is just crazy to me. So here I am, someone who in the early 2000s would have been considered very, far on like the liberal spectrum, because like being gay was still such a sensational thing then, to the average person. And now with the passage of 20 years, I'm somehow in the category of this like holding tank with people who are called Nazis, and everybody with two brain cells can tell that this word has no objective meaning anymore, that it's just a term of excommunication that's slung around so broadly that you can't take it seriously. But this also kind of intimidating people out of like associating with anyone bad, this sort of like this cancellation mindset where the libs are all doing these like 6 degrees of separation, like so-and-so talked with so-and-so and they're friends with so-and-so. Like, no, there's no like human connection allowed. It's all based on being part of this like in-group that has a spotless history, as though like talking to anyone or having a conversation means that you endorse every single thing that they say. So yeah, the title is just a response to my not knowing where I fit in the current culture, as someone who's only real like consistent political ideal is that I'm against censorship.
Oh yeah? Well, hang on now. I mean, I'm sure you are being called a fascist in particular for two things. One, your hatred and verbal evisceration of liberalism, and two, your hatred and verbal evisceration of modern feminism. You have to plead guilty to doing those things, right? Yeah. And so that gets conflated with Nazism. When you hate liberalism and feminism that much as you do, and especially, well, no, you don't even have to have arguments, but if you just hate them, you're going to get thrown into that bucket. And to me, the most of the politics I've heard you talk about are those. You have like absolutely brilliant, devastating critiques of especially modern feminism, but also liberalism. And one of the things I heard you say, which shocked me, but I think you're right. I can't prove it, nor can you really, but I think it's probably right. You call misogyny something that doesn't exist. You call misogyny, you call expressions of fear of misogyny or the use of the term misogyny a dodge, right?
I mean, it's a way,
or a shield.
it's a way for modern feminists to avoid culpability and responsibility for anything that they do. And we've gone so far down the feminist wormhole that women have to literally use like psychological methods that resemble witchcraft in order to maintain their power. So there's this puritanical hatred of sex from the feminists, and that's aside from the careerism aspect of Me Too, where they were taking and supplanting men's jobs, like more powerful men is just kind of like a way for a new generation of like Borg executives and stuff in the movie industry to move up the ladder. But there's also this like crucible type hysteria about all sexuality. And now the line on, it keeps expanding to where women can retroactively decide that anything was rape at any time. Men can too, but it doesn't matter. They always kind of say like stuff can happen to men. It doesn't matter. It doesn't pull at the heartstrings of the culture in the same way.
Yep.
So they can retroactively decide that, anything was rape. This current hilarious age gap discourse where the age of legal consent keeps getting moved up to like now it's around like 35 because women cannot consent to sex.
That's right.
They're being psyoped and pressured into it. And if there's any kind of disparity, whether it be several months or 10 years, whatnot, then the older, more powerful man is intimidating the woman into sex. This runs side by side with the current liberal fad of sex work, which is white, millennial, and Zoomer women pretending to be prostitutes online. And that's ennobling and good to the second after you turn 18, the magical number 18, the second after you turn 18, you start an OnlyFans and you get a sugar daddy and all this stuff. And that you can consent to. But anything resembling the courtship of old, if a guy just like tells you, that you're pretty or something, that's rape, that's coercion. Okay. This is all self-evidently stupid and ridiculous. Everyone knows. It's just no one's willing to speak out publicly because you're intimidated out of it.
So it sounds like you see the society as devolving into Freud's Madonna and whore binary. Is that right?
Yes, and but to answer your question about the concept of misogyny, like much like racism, I know what real racism is, and you can spot it. You can tell very quickly what real, actual racism is.
It's definable too.
It's definable, but the way that the term has been slung around for literally 10 years means that nobody knows what it actually is. But the misogyny is hilarious to me because I engage with women on my level. I give them like full intellectual credit for their own thoughts, their own actions, their own artwork, whatever they made. I don't condescend to them, yet I'm somehow on the level, I'm somehow in the misogyny camp. And it's like, no, what I'm speaking out against is this noxious witch hunt phenomenon that's been going on for 10 years. And that's not the entire history of women, but you can just, like dismiss anything. If you employ humor at all, they'll always be like, if you're ever funny about anything, they'll like kind of like call you on that as well.
Yeah.
Like demonize you for like using like extreme humor or jokes to criticize anything. Yeah. But it's like, you can spot real misogyny, and I don't know. It's easy.
Well, one group that's been accused of misogyny historically is gay men, right? And you've talked a lot about,
true.
Which is you've talked a lot about this on the show, your show, especially in the world of fashion, high fashion in particular, right? So you look at there was that, you've talked about this a lot, but there was a controversy, I guess, in the 70s and 80s about some of the French high couture designers who were designing things that basically looked like BDSM outfits, right, for women.
Yeah, the whole history of fashion is gay men binding up and torturing women for aesthetic purposes, and this creates some really amazing fantasy imagery. But and feminism always hated fashion. I think with woke capitalism and the sort of intermingling of all these different industries, now it looks like fashion has always been a wing of social justice feminism. It hasn't. That's just what occurred. But like old feminists used to hate the entirety of fashion. Terry Mugler and Claude Montana particularly were criticized by feminists heavily in the 80s for dressing up women in severe leather outfits that resembled SS officers. There was a very fascistic aesthetic there that had not been seen in fashion before. And these are the men who popularized shoulder pads as well, which eventually were, put in t-shirts, and everyone was wearing shoulder pads. But the original shoulder pad image was a totally icy, frosty, inhuman, insect-like woman with a tightly cinched waist and huge Joan Crawford shoulder pads, covered head to toe in black leather. Part of that whole misunderstanding about fashion is that people, again, don't have any interest in history. They think that fashion has always just been like, that whatever Balenciaga, Bernie Sanders stuff from a few years ago.
Right. So you do say that those designers of the 80s were in fact misogynistic in their designing.
I think it's pretty clear. Claude Montana was very abusive to he was always openly gay, but he had a wife who was a model. Okay. I forget her name, but she eventually kind of threw herself off a balcony, I believe, because of his misogynistic abuse. Mugler, the thing about Mugler is nobody can look at Mugler's stuff and just not be totally enchanted. You'd have to have a heart of stone to look at like these Jerry Hall ads for Angel and everything where she's in the desert. But yeah, he always depicts women as like insects or dominatrices, whatever. But like he's just this weird, like this French guy, they put they embroider what he's doing with the proper like self-affirming kind of corporate feminist language, where it's like she's doing this as a power move for herself. But I think reading the actual content of Mugler's designs, you see something else that runs very counter to this surface level like self-empowerment stuff. Like in the early 2010s, he released a perfume called Womanity that was a commercial failure. It was a pink juice in a cylindrical bottle with what looked like an H.R. Giger mask on the atomizer, and it had a little cuff with a chain that you took off to spray the perfume. So very like strange science fiction, like unfriendly stuff. Add to that, the big marketing ploy of the perfume was that it had a fish note, really a caviar note. This was deliberately played up to be sensational, but like they did this website where it was all about like women connecting with women, but he literally has like, to represent women, a fish perfume with like a chain and a mask that's pink. Like you can read that very easily.
So why is it that gay men are more likely to be misogynistic if they are? It sounds like they might be. Because one would think, most straights would think it'd be the other way around.
Yeah, I think it's because you're not as like spellbound, by like the feminine enchantment. Like as a gay man, you you emerge from the world of women. Typically, when you're a child, you're comfortable around women. You're comfortable around your mother, female friends. You have a lot more in common with women. And then, through puberty, you develop an interest in men, and straight men always seemed more inscrutable and like brutal, and like an interest in sports seemed totally like, that's not what I wanted to do. But then you gradually want to impress yourself, to the world of straight men and be seen as more masculine. And I think just developing along these opposite tracks is what makes straight men really want to like impress women and let women totally control their lives in a way. It's just a necessary like biological thing. But if you're gay, you can also, I think you have a better understanding of the female brain, because I sort of subscribe to the old Victorian notion that homosexuals have woman brains trapped in men's bodies. I kind of like, to a degree, like I do think I have a very a generally female mind, and I like I have this like masculine Apollonian obsession with like cataloging everything and putting everything in order and like learning everything, and being really defiantly like true to myself. But I also have this like innate like kind of emotional understanding of the strange operations of the female mind, and I think they don't like that I can read their minds.
But so on the one hand, I'm hearing that misogyny doesn't exist and it's just a tool used to shield women from criticism. And on the other hand, I'm hearing that it's real, and it's real among gays, and especially gay designers. So which is it?
Well, when I say it doesn't exist, I'm talking about the word, because there needs to be a new word. Like the language is exhausted.
Okay.
Same with racism. There's just no way to talk about anything anymore.
But I mean, what was Terry Mugler like? He hated women. Is that what his misogyny was? Was a hatred of women, or a desire to do something else with women?
I don't think having a kind of natural fear of the eternal feminine and exercising that through art, I don't think that that's necessarily like literal hatred of women. Like you look at something like Tom Ford's movie Nocturnal Animals, it's an amazing movie, but it's extremely misogynistic. I don't know how they got away, much less Tom Ford, who's like, a Democrat shitlib that the celebrities love, like all the rest of them, how he got away with something that's so brutal in its depiction of the like mental operations of women. I just think that everything's like a continuum. Like you can't restrict yourself to like, misogyny is a strict definition of like wanting to kill and oppress women.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the whole story.
Right. I mean, who out there is always defining their attitudes about women according to this hatred of them, right? I mean, who out there is always looking at women with a hatred? I suppose there have been some, maybe a few mass shooters. But I think you come upon a really brilliant point here, which is that I think you're right. It's not allowing us to ever be angry at women. It's not allowing us to hate women in a moment, right? Because there are things that women do that are hateful, right? That victimize people, victimize each other. But that will get called misogynist. It could be when Hillary Clinton wins if she had won the election and bombed the shit out of Syria, and we said that's not so cool, I'm sure there would have been some calls of misogyny.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And
I like Hillary Clinton, for the record.
Do you? Why? Wait, she's the whole...
I do.
She's the queen of the 2010s. What are you talking about?
Yeah, their mistake with Hillary was seeking to put her in this like this cringe social justice framework. Like I think she's much more appealing as just a reptilian operative, like murdering people with the drone button.
Yeah.
That's her natural state. When she was like laughing about killing those guys, I was like, I can see the appeal here. And just her, ruthlessness in that way is much more appealing than what they tried to do, where she's this like whiny woman that needs to be elected just because she deserves it. But yeah, I mean, like, no, I like Hillary.
Really?
Hmm.
But you're the only person I've never known who likes Hillary and Trump both.
Oh, that was good. It was like Godzilla versus Mothra. I mean, there will never be anything that good ever again. And
Yeah.
I love it. Was just like I think it's season 8 of Dynasty where Blake and Alexis are running for governor of Colorado against each other. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I can't imagine liking Hillary. She is so unlikable to me.
Straight men hate her.
Yeah.
I see the camp value in her too. It's that self-seriousness. I like how totally like asexual she is too.
Yeah, I see. She's
in her like Mao suits. Like,
yeah,
she looked great in the 90s as well. Oh, she is reputed to have worn Angel in the 90s, where I really like imagining her like wearing Angel in like 1995 with her hair all done, going off about like the vast right-wing conspiracy.
Yeah, I can see she's a camp archetype of the super serious schoolgirl type, right?
And she also, like, I think the Hillary types, and to an extent Kamala Harris types, are much more respectable than the like AOC like millennial types that actually believe the shit that they're selling. I think there's a degree of respectability in just how fake Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris's like bids for social justice recognition are. Like, you can just see them turning it right off. Like, and Kamala can't even like conceal it. Like, she's so uncharismatic, like.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, now you got thrown out of the liberal world when you started talking about feminism, and then you really I think you said you lost your last friend when you came out against abortion.
Oh yeah. I'm trying to think.
That was the final
I mean,
straw.
like, I went through a period, like, there's the kind of Paglia take where you recognize that it's murder, but you still think that it should be illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Legal, rather. I kind of went through that before the last several years of like just how apparent it has become that it's this just cultural satanic ceremony of baby sacrifice that's paradoxically paired with the people who are telling us all the time about empathy and caring for others, and it's really easy to see the whole kind of antinatalist neoliberal plan and the psyop and how well it worked on modern women, and where every maternal instinct, every like natural feminine instinct is demonized and made embarrassing. So it's like every single girl that I have ever known said that I never want kids, I hate kids, I hate babies, until they're exactly like 38. And then they realize, no, there's something else to life than just like going to restaurants and ordering takeout and like filling out spreadsheets. And it makes me sad because like I can't really have kids. Like, I don't want to do some like gay, creepy like Pete Buttigieg like adopting an Asian or whatever. It's just like straight people should have kids.
It can get you elected though. It could get you elected.
But it's like the I don't even think of like being against, because of the circles I run in, I barely even like remember that being against abortion is a controversial take.
Right. Right.
But like every now and then, like the haters will pile on, and I'm like reminded, like, oh yeah, the average person really does just think that women can declare when a human life begins at any point, and also declare when it ends. Another bit of that like witchcraft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, to me,
which I'm not saying like I'm not saying if I were a woman it wouldn't be different, because obviously gay men have their own like problematic natural instincts and like just weird stuff that you have to deal with, and I just wish that more people had just like had kids when they were 18 instead of this current generational disaster where no one my age has kids at all.
Right.
White people.
Yeah, you're a millennial, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I'm 33.
Yeah, right. Let's talk about empathy again. You raised that earlier, and I thought it was fascinating, but we didn't unpack it. So I have my own take on empathy, and you're the only other person I've ever heard who has a critique of empathy. So I want to, can you lay that out? Your take on
So
empathy?
I think what happened in the beginning, there was Christianity, which gave people a reason to think beyond themselves and do good for others. And then Christianity was taken from us and made uncool. And so liberals are grasping for some kind of moral structure that they can apply to their ever shifting, ever changing vortex of rules, radical extremist rules that they have to enforce. And this idea of having to do things out of empathy and caring for others, it's like exactly how Ayn Rand depicts liberals in her books. Like people really hate Ayn Rand, and they have this kind of received wisdom sort of line that like she's a bad writer. You can't tell me her satirical depiction of liberals in The Fountainhead, it's true in every single way, especially the media and the art world. It's all there. And like this, just looking at what the libs are doing right now, there's no element of that is even like extreme or exaggerated, because it's literally just like from day to day, the rules change, everything changes. You have to publicly adhere to new little increasingly Byzantine rules, or else you're put in this holding tank, this growing holding tank that doesn't exist, that's called like alternately the alt-right or white supremacy or deplorables, whatever. It's just this, the number of rules keep going up, and the holding tank keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and no one wants to speak out against it because it's dangerous. And
Yeah, if you look at the top 100 or 200 podcasts on iTunes charts, it's really clear what's going on. It's been going on for years. There's half of them are the NPR podcasts or NPR type podcasts, which now are unlistenable to me, even though I grew up with them, having been immersed in our world for several years now. It's just an entirely different way of speaking that it sounds like car crashing to me. And then the other half, more or less, is everyone who's sort of outside that, right? Or antagonistic. So there's the old school like Republican types, but then there's the Joe Rogan's the hub of it, but then there's Red Scare, and there's you, and there's my podcast. There's just sort of people who are rejecting what Curtis Yarvin calls the cathedral, right? The liberal, the progressive hegemonic culture that's been hegemonic for about a century in this country. Those of us who live outside of that question it and throw rocks at it. The thing about empathy, I like what you're saying about it. For me, it's always been baffling that anyone could even conjure it. It's such a superstitious idea. To me, how could I possibly know what you need or want? And then on top, and even worse, the arrogance of me assuming what you need or want. And then even worse than that, enacting some sort of state violence to make sure you get what I think you need and want. It's all projection of my own stuff onto you, which I will then enforce usually through the power of the government, right? In terms of political empathy, that's what it ends up looking like. In other words, the poor people of the ghetto need more money. Well, we're going to put more cops in there and more social workers, and we're going to send them checks, but we're going to make sure that strings are attached so that they live better, right? Live correctly. It's not, did the reformers who went into the ghettos in the 1910s and 20s and 1960s and 70s, did they really know what the people there wanted and needed? Or was it white liberal reformers thinking they knew what poor black and brown people wanted and needed?
And the liberal concept of empathy is also tied up with actively destroying and demonizing the family, because you have the New York Times article that tells you that it's your duty to purge all problematic people from your life, and your duty to scold the uncle, who's just supporting Trump or whatever. And if you don't, then you're part of the problem. And this is a big reason, why I think all my old friends kind of dumped me, is that they just that's the message of that you are actively like dragging people behind a truck or whatever. You're responsible for it if you don't purge everyone who is problematic and show them that there's something wrong with what they're doing.
But don't you think there is something wrong with the nuclear family, the American nuclear family?
No, I'm really sentimental about that. I love my
Yeah.
family. I'm a total like mama's boy. I mean, I had really like open-minded and supportive parents who like indulge my every whim, and like I watch soap operas with them like every Sunday. I love family. I think a lot of these problems that Gen Xers and everyone troublemakers run into, it's because they don't like their parents. I feel sorry for them.
Yeah, I'm one of them. Feel sorry for me.
Whoops.
It's okay. She doesn't listen.
Your mom just called with the perfume.
But she never listens to the podcast, so I can say whatever I want. Yeah.
Oh, well, you want her to listen? I don't want my parents to listen to mine.
Well,
they know that Jack is always, whatever he does will be extreme. So like I played the Marquis de Sade in like high school one act. Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you had countercultural parents who accepted you from the get go, right? Now,
yeah, but not in the terms of like, they're being left-wing hippies, because they're not. They're like very sensibly conservative. They're just naturally open-minded and cool.
Okay. But you had a very good, unlike a lot of gay men and women, childhood and family, right? They was very supportive. Now, you do know, of course, the history of this. The family and homosexuals is not such a friendly one, right?
No, it's not.
So, I mean, there's got to be something in there that you can see. So, in other words, your take is like exactly half queer, it seems to me. Like, there's like half of what you do is super queer and half of it is anti-queer, meaning not queer in the big sense, right? So, like, the wearing perfume, promoting, celebrating perfume, encouraging others to wear perfume to fill this world with aesthetic sense and color and the pleasures of the senses, right? Against this neoliberal sterility that you talk about, which I don't know if it's neoliberal, but I do see there's a lot of sterility in all kinds of ways. That's queer as hell, right? That's a totally queer intervention. That's like a unique, in fact, I've never seen anybody do that, distinctive queer intervention. That is something that drag queens have been telling us forever, right? Which is like, you all do not enjoy your bodies enough. There is so much more you can do with them. Put things on them and make them smell better. Aren't just two of them, right? That's completely queer. But then celebrating the nuclear family, which of course is like the most traditional, the most, conservative institution, obviously we all agree, in our society, and has been historically, at least less so now, historically been an awful place for a lot of gay men and women, right? And so I just don't know what you do with that. It sounds like you just had an exceptional family and were very lucky in that way, but don't you think better? You want to stick with the nuclear family? You think it's a good model for society? I mean,
I don't purport to like have a solution to anything. Literally, I just am speaking of my own experience, which I understand is kind of unusual and exceptional in a way, but it also kind of takes away some credit from me, because I have always done things through a sheer will to power. Like, whether it be perfume or just forcing people to accept my homosexuality when it wasn't as acceptable a thing. I know everyone doesn't like being like a bold provocateur or whatever, but they should probably take some inspiration from it, especially in the current day where everyone on both sides just encourages you to be quiet. Like the far right guys who love anonymity, they also hate me because I don't really believe in it. I think it's cowardly. I understand the reasons that people do it, but I don't think that your ideas or your work resonates if you're ashamed of associating yourself with your ideas. And if you are ashamed, then you've probably gone too far and you're in the realm of genuine nonsensical hatred that's not going to have a positive impact on your life whatsoever. But this whole project that I've been doing, I mean, I encounter a lot of hostility because of the lack of anonymity. Like, people are really attached to the idea that you should live this divided life where all of your thoughts and criticisms of liberalism are this little cute little safe online identity that you just vomit out. And it's like, no, if there's no pairing between the person you are in your real life and the one that you are online, then all the evil goes to one side and all the good and the pristine surfaces go to the other. It's I think more people should be bolder in their condemnations of what's going on. There's always a reason for, no matter what, there's always a reason someone will give you for not publicly speaking out against what's happening. They always use your family as ransom, especially, and I think this is a benefit that gay men tend to have because we don't have children or wives or whatever. With straight men, they always use your family as ransom. Like, you can't say that you don't support censorship because they will come after your family.
Yep.
And it's like, how is anyone ever going to say anything?
Yep.
How's anyone going to produce a good cultural product if we're all living in total fear with our families being held at ransom because we're speaking total common sense that most people believe in?
Yep, I hear you. Now, you're partly anonymous, though. You don't use your last name.
No, I mean, I do think it's good to have like several layers between, I don't think you need to post your birth certificate online.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
I think it's smart to have like several layers,
Right.
That's also just the kind of meme language and the way people do things, like, aesthetically in this wing of the internet. But it used to, like 2 years ago, before my podcast, before some other ones, like, that people were afraid of even voice doxing. They would like freak out about that. That's been normalized in a big way in the last couple years.
Yeah.
But I don't think the end result of like splitting your personality into all of this swamp, this id of like every like bad impulse you have and vomiting it online and then being this fake person in real life to everyone, I don't think that it's healthy.
No. And it's good that you're accountable, right? It forces courage, right?
Yeah, because I think that a lot of people, some people use anonymity with good intentions, just as a way of staying safe, and preserving the divide between their private and personal lives, especially if they're not doing this sort of thing as like a career and have no interest in that. And then 97% of people just use anonymity for targeted harassment and bullying. I'm sorry, it's true.
Sadism.
This may seem like a very like victim-y left-wing take. That's what most people do when they are not held accountable for anything. They're just like cruel.
They get to exercise their sadism. So the podcast is doing really well, right? I just saw a tweet from you a couple weeks ago where you said you paid your rent with the proceeds of it for the first time. Is that right?
Yeah, the pandemic has been a big boon to the podcast. I mean, the first almost year of it, we weren't monetized at all. We were just doing it for fun. We also just wanted to like demonstrate the purity of our intentions, because most of the people in this podcast grift, just like, they have the Patreon button first thing. It's just all a very cynical ploy for money. And this has worked out in the long run because we have a very devoted and positive fan base that genuinely likes the content, rather than this kind of like parasocial negative fan base that a lot of other shows have. Like, because we are talking about stuff that we like, stuff that we think enriches our lives, rather than just giving reaction to the news every day that's entirely negative, it has a different kind of fan base. And, you know, I see this in like letters from people and everything. But yeah, the last 4 months or so, it's gone from this little kind of family project essentially to something much larger.
Yeah. And your fan base is astonishingly diverse. I mean, all of the people I know who are fans are straight men who I'm sure don't own any perfume.
They do after they get into it.
Maybe.
That's
Oh, really?
I've sold.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They start buying it. I mean, I've sold untold thousands of dollars of perfume. I'm not exaggerating.
Wow.
It's really funny to be selling a product so effectively and be someone that can't be mentioned by name
I know.
by anyone in polite society.
Why can't
But yeah, I have straight men buying obscure 70s women's perfumes. They're like Cologne Yadigan, which the second episode we ever did was about Bronze Age mindset, but I paired the 70s perfume called Yadigan with that, and it's been consistently sold out. You know,
Wow.
Like there's definitely, I'm sure someone is looking at the numbers for units sold and wondering what's happening with some of this stuff. But yeah, people that never would have otherwise spent money on perfume, they're spending a lot of money on perfume now.
Would you do sponsorship deals with perfume companies?
I just can't imagine that. I mean, I'm so used to being so stigmatized that I can't even be mentioned directly.
Yeah, right.
Like, I mean, even before we kind of blew up a little in the last few months, like after we blew up and we're sort of like normalized, I had all these people like sending me DMs about like, I liked the show and I listened to it, but I was just like, I can't get behind everything you say, and I just want you to know that I don't agree with everything you say. And like, they send me this stuff with all these qualifications. Like, if you talk to me, then it's assumed that you support and agree with everything I say.
Right.
But if you talk to anyone else, it's different. But I don't know. There's always been such cowardice and just like directly saying you like the show or admiring it in a way until recently.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot. But I think the fact that we were just doing this for fun, doing it not to make money for a long time. Now we have this giant backlog that I can point to that's essentially like my sexual personae, spells out my theory. And one of my polemics is that people should listen to the entire thing from start to finish before really deciding what they think about it. And that's essential, because anytime that I like get hate online, it's just for these little things pulled out of context. But when you know the entire context, it's like reading a book. It's like reading a novel.
Yeah.
You see something much different
than
what you come away with from like little viral tweet negative opinions.
Absolutely.
Bandwagon opinions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if I smell a straight man wearing perfume, it's likely that he's a fan of your show. Am I right?
I would, which if it's a Chypre, if it's a heavy patchouli, something, if it's a certain type of scent, yeah, I would wager.
Yeah.
Until I see one of the T-shirts in the wild, then I'll know. Then I'll feel success when I see one of the.
Well, it sounds like
shirts.
you've got straight men wearing perfume, not just buying the bottles, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's an impressive feat right there, just that alone. Not to mention your incendiary and I think brilliant takes on modern liberalism and feminism, even though I don't agree with every single aspect. I mean, between you and Red Scare, I mean, if you listen to one episode of Red Scare and one episode of the Perfume Nationalist and come away without all of your ideas about feminism just in ashes, burning ashes, I don't know.
We're doing the work.
You really, I mean, the four of you or the five of you on those two shows, I mean, especially you and Anna together, I mean, feminism can't survive your critique. It's so devastating. My God. So, and it's like scintillating to listen to, but like you even make me a little nervous. I've been, very angry at feminism for a long time, but like I was kind of holding on to it by my fingernails. I wanted it to be something, and I was like, come on. I still called myself a feminist when asked, But it's so, God, the way you guys just annihilate it and expose it, I can't help but agree with you, and I don't see a future for that movement in my head.
Well, I mean, that's something that as soon as I started listening to Red Scare, I was amazed at what they were doing by shielding themselves to a degree by the sort of outside trappings of being just like a New York, ostensibly like socialist, Bernie, whatever, art ho podcast with Vocal Fry, which everyone mentioned, and these like they from the beginning were saying things that no one in polite society would dare say. They were calling Me Too's bullshit. They did 3 episodes specifically about Me Too, like right near the beginning, when everyone was still just a religious adherent of the purity of intentions of Me Too. They said that casually said that Russiagate was fake from the very beginning. Like their engagement with the forbidden aesthetics of the online right, all of this, and putting it in an aesthetically pleasing package, which I think is one of the first real examples of a podcast as art. It's genuine art to me. And yeah, that's when I heard Red Scare, I was like, I could probably try my hand at this. They're a big inspiration.
Yeah. If you like Unregistered, the Perfume Nationalist and Red Scare are sort of like the next level in some ways of what we're doing here. You guys are even more balls out and unafraid, and the deliberate sort of lack of professional performance, right? Especially with them, but even with you. Yeah. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have ever even listened to you because of that, because it just looks unprofessional, but it's so seductive once you start listening. And the lack of professionalism ends up being one of the winning points in both cases, because it's so authentic and it's so real, and it feels like we're in the room with you, for both podcasts. So I just want to say thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing this. I really love what you're doing. I hope you just go on forever. And I hope people listen to you and take you seriously. And I hope that feminists are scared.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on.
Good. And let's talk soon. Maybe we can collaborate on something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to have you on.
Great. All right, Jack. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. To join the new Renegade University, go to renegadeuniversity.com. To join the new Unregistered Underground, the supporting listeners group for the podcast, go to unregisteredunderground.com. Thanks for listening.